My son chose a woman over his family and disappeared. Years later, he came back smiling. But he didn't expect what I had in store for him. My wife, Elizabeth, passed away last week after battling cancer for 2 years. We were married for 48 years and loved each other deeply. Elizabeth was my rock, my best friend, and the love of my life. We had a good life together, living in the same big house we bought when we were newlyweds. It was always filled with laughter and love, especially when our son, Tom, was growing up. Tom was our only child, and we doted on him. We sent him to the best schools and supported all his dreams and ambitions. He was a good kid, always respectful and hardworking. When he went off to college, we were so proud. We thought he'd come back home after graduating, maybe find a job in the city and settle down nearby, but life had other plans. During his senior year, Tom met a girl named Anna. They fell in love quickly and got married right after graduation. We were happy for them, but we were also worried. They were so young, and Tom had just started his career. We offered to let them live with us until they got on their feet, but they declined. They wanted to make it on their own. At first, Tom called regularly. He'd tell us about his new job, their apartment, and their life together. But as time went on, the calls became less frequent. Weeks turned into months, and before we knew it, a whole year had passed without hearing from him. We tried calling, but he never picked up. We sent letters, but they went unanswered. It was like he had disappeared from our lives completely. Elizabeth and I were heartbroken. We couldn't understand why our son had cut us off. We wondered if we had done something wrong, if we had been bad parents somehow. The house felt emptier than ever. We missed the sound of Tom's laughter, the way he'd bound down the stairs in the morning, even the mess he'd leave in the kitchen after making a midnight snack. As the years went by, we learned to live with the silence. We focused on each other, on our hobbies, and on our friends. We traveled a bit, saw some of the places we'd always dreamed of visiting, but there was always a Tom-shaped hole in our hearts. Every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone, we'd think of him and wonder how he was doing. When Elizabeth got sick, I hoped Tom would somehow find out and come home. I imagined him rushing through the door, full of apologies and worry, but he never came. I took care of Elizabeth myself, with help from our neighbors and friends. It was hard watching the vibrant woman I loved fade away, but we faced it together, just like we had faced everything else in our lives. After Elizabeth passed, I was lost. The house felt empty without her in it. I wandered from room to room, touching her things, remembering our life together. Planning her funeral was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I wanted it to be perfect, a fitting tribute to the amazing woman she was. The day of the funeral arrived. I stood at the front of the church, greeting people as they came in, and then I saw him. Tom. He was older, of course, with touches of gray at his temples. Beside him was a woman I assumed was Anna and 2 children, a boy and a girl. I froze, not knowing what to do or say. Tom approached me hesitantly. He looked nervous, his eyes red-rimmed, like he'd been crying. We stared at each other for a moment, and then he hugged me. It was awkward at first, but then I felt myself relax into it. It felt like coming home. We didn't have time to talk much before the service started. Tom and his family sat in the front row with me. Throughout the service, I could hear him sniffling beside me. When it was time for people to share memories of Elizabeth, Tom stood up. His voice shaking, he talked about how patient and kind Elizabeth had been, how she always made his favorite cookies when he was sad, how she taught him to ride a bike and bandaged his scraped knees. By the end, we were all in tears. After the funeral, as people were leaving, Tom asked if we could talk. We went to a quiet corner of the church. He broke down then, apologizing over and over for not being there, for cutting us off, for missing out on so much time. He said he had been young and stupid, caught up in proving he could make it on his own. He said Anna had encouraged him to reach out many times, but he had been too ashamed. I listened to him, my heart breaking all over again, but I also felt a weight lifting. My son was back. He hadn't forgotten us, hadn't stopped loving us. He had just lost his way for a while. I forgave him. How could I not? He was my son, and I loved him. We hugged again, and this time it felt right, natural, like no time had passed at all. Tom introduced me properly to Anna and the kids, my grandchildren. I couldn't believe it. The boy, Michael, was 8, and the girl, Emily, was 6. They were beautiful, and they called me Grandpa right away. It was surreal. We all went back to the house after the funeral. As the kids explored the big old place, running up and down the stairs and exclaiming over everything, Tom and I sat in the living room. We talked for hours, catching up on all the lost years. He told me about his job, his life, his struggles, and triumphs. I told him about Elizabeth's illness, about our travels, about how we'd missed him. As the evening wore on, I finally asked Tom what his plans were. He hesitated, then told me he had a good job in another state, where he and his family had settled. They had a nice house, the kids were in good schools, and Anna had a career she loved. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was worried about me, about leaving me alone in this big house, but I knew what I had to do. I told him it was okay, that he should go back to his life. I said I was just happy to have him back in my life and that we could visit each other. Tom protested at first. He suggested I sell the house and move closer to them, but I couldn't do that. This house was full of memories of Elizabeth, of our life together. It was my home. In the end, Tom agreed to go back. We made plans for regular visits and phone calls. As they were leaving, Tom hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you, Dad. I love you." After they left, I sat in Elizabeth's favorite chair and cried. I cried for all the lost years, for Elizabeth, who didn't get to see this reconciliation, for the grandchildren we never knew we had. But I also cried from happiness. My family was whole again. Now, a week later, I'm wondering if I did the right thing. Should I have asked Tom to move back? Am I being selfish by staying in this house? But then I think of Tom's life, his career, his children's schools. I think of the life he's built for himself, and I know I made the right choice. First, I want to thank everyone for their kind words and support. Your responses helped me feel more confident in my decision not to ask Tom to move back home. After the funeral, Tom kept his promise to stay in touch. He called me every week, sometimes more often. We talked about everything, his work, the kids, my daily life. It felt good to reconnect with my son after so many years apart. About a month after the funeral, Tom surprised me by showing up for a weekend visit with his family. I was overjoyed to see them. We spent the weekend looking through old photo albums, telling stories about Elizabeth, and playing with the grandkids in the backyard. It felt like we were making up for lost time. To my surprise, these visits became a regular occurrence. Every other weekend, Tom and his family would drive down to spend time with me. Sometimes they'd stay overnight, other times just for the day. Each visit filled the house with laughter and life again. I started to look forward to these weekends, planning activities and cooking big meals for everyone. Tom seemed genuinely interested in my life. He asked about my friends, my hobbies, and how I was coping with Elizabeth's loss. He even helped me with some home repairs I'd been putting off. I felt touched by his attention and care. It seemed like he was really trying to make amends for the years he'd been absent. However, about 2 months into these regular visits, I started noticing something odd. Tom began asking more questions about financial matters. At first, it was casual. He'd ask how I was managing with just my pension or if I'd considered downsizing to a smaller home. I didn't think much of it initially. I assumed he was just concerned about my well-being. But then the questions became more frequent and more specific. He asked about my savings, my investments, and even about Elizabeth's life insurance policy. He wanted to know if I had updated my will recently. These conversations made me uncomfortable, but I tried to brush it off. I told myself that Tom was just trying to make sure I was taken care of in my old age. Things came to a head last week when my sister, Linda, came to visit after Tom and his family left on Sunday evening. Linda sat me down for a serious talk. She told me that several of our relatives and close friends had noticed Tom's behavior and were concerned. Apparently, Tom had been asking them questions about my financial situation as well. Linda mentioned that Tom had asked her about the value of the house and whether she knew anything about my pension program. He had even inquired about any potential inheritances from other family members. She was worried that Tom might be more interested in my money than in rebuilding our relationship. I was shocked and hurt by this revelation. I didn't want to believe it, but as I thought back over the past few months, I realized that Tom's questions had indeed become increasingly focused on financial matters. The realization made me angry and confused. Was this why he had suddenly reappeared in my life? Was he just after my money? I spent the next few days thinking over the situation. I thought about all the good moments we'd shared over the past few months, the laughter, the shared memories, the way Tom had helped around the house. It was hard to reconcile those experiences with the idea that he might have ulterior motives. Part of me wanted to confront Tom immediately, to demand an explanation for his behavior, but another part of me was afraid. What if it was true? What if I lost my son again, just when I thought I had him back? I decided to take a step back and observe. I didn't want to jump to conclusions based on hearsay, even if it came from people I trusted. I resolved to pay closer attention to Tom's behavior during his next visit, to see if I could discern his true intentions. Now, I find myself in a difficult position. I'm grateful for the time I've been able to spend with my son and grandchildren. These past few months have brought me joy I hadn't felt in years. But I can't ignore the nagging doubts that have crept in. I'm torn between my love for my son and my need to protect myself. I don't want to believe that Tom is only interested in my money, but I can't dismiss the concerns of my sister and friends. I'm worried that confronting Tom might drive him away again, but I'm equally worried about being taken advantage of. So now, I'm turning to you, Reddit. What should I do? How can I find out Tom's true intentions without jeopardizing our newly rebuilt relationship? Am I overreacting to these concerns, or should I be more cautious? Any advice would be appreciated as I navigate this complicated situation. I've made a difficult discovery about my son's true intentions. After much thought and consideration of the advice I received, I decided to test Tom to see if his renewed interest in my life was genuine or motivated by financial gain. I came up with a plan that I hoped would reveal Tom's true colors. I decided to tell him that I was ready to sell the house and move closer to him and his family. I thought this would give me a chance to observe his reaction and see how he'd handle the prospect of me actually becoming a more permanent part of his life. When Tom and his family arrived for their next weekend visit, I waited until after dinner to bring up the subject. The kids were playing in the living room, and Tom, Anna, and I were sitting around the kitchen table. I took a deep breath and told them I'd been thinking a lot about my future. I said that living alone in this big house was becoming too much for me to handle. I told them I missed having family around and that I had decided to sell the house and move closer to them. I watched their faces carefully as I spoke. Tom's reaction was not what I had hoped for. Instead of looking happy or excited at the prospect of having me nearby, he seemed taken aback. He exchanged a quick glance with Anna before asking me if I was sure about this decision. His voice sounded more concerned than pleased. Then Tom asked the question I'd been dreading: how much did I think the house would sell for? I told him the estimated value, which was quite substantial, given the size of the house and its location. As soon as I mentioned the figure, I saw a spark of interest in both Tom and Anna's eyes. They quickly recovered and started talking about how great it would be to have me closer. They discussed potential neighborhoods where I could live and even offered to help with the move. But I couldn't shake the feeling that their enthusiasm was more about the money than about me. As the evening went on, Tom and Anna became more animated. They talked about all the things we could do together once I moved. They even suggested I could babysit the kids more often. On the surface, everything seemed positive, but something felt off. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my mind, trying to make sense of Tom's reactions. As I was about to go back to my room after getting a glass of water, I heard hushed voices coming from the guest room where Tom and Anna were staying. I know it wasn't right, but I couldn't help myself. I stood near the door and listened. What I heard broke my heart. Tom and Anna were discussing the prospect of selling the house. Tom said that with that kind of money, they could pay off all their loans and still have plenty left over. He talked about renovating their home, buying a new car, and taking luxury vacations. Anna sounded excited too, but then she asked about where I would live. Tom's response chilled me to the bone. He said he would convince me to move into a retirement home or assisted living facility. He argued that it would be better for everyone. I'd have round-the-clock care, and they wouldn't have to worry about me. Anna seemed hesitant, but Tom insisted he could persuade me. As I stood there listening, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me: anger, hurt, disappointment, and a deep, aching sadness. This was my son, the little boy I had raised and loved, now plotting to take my home and put me in a facility just to get his hands on my money. I couldn't bear to listen anymore. Without thinking, I pushed open the door. Tom and Anna jumped, startled by my sudden appearance. The look on their faces when they realized I had overheard their conversation was a mixture of shock and guilt. For a moment, we all just stared at each other in silence. Then the dam broke. All the hurt and anger I had been holding back came pouring out. I accused Tom of being greedy and selfish. I reminded him that he hadn't even bothered to come see his mother when she was dying, and now he was back just because he needed money. I told him I knew about all the questions he'd been asking our relatives and friends about my finances. I said I had hoped he had truly wanted to reconnect, to be a family again, but now I saw that it was all about the money. Tom tried to defend himself. He said I had misunderstood, that he was just trying to plan for the future. He claimed he was worried about my well-being and wanted to make sure I was taken care of. But his excuses rang hollow in light of what I had just overheard. Anna sat silently, tears streaming down her face. She didn't try to defend Tom or offer any explanations of her own. Her silence spoke volumes. I told them both that I wanted them to leave immediately. It was the middle of the night, but I couldn't bear to have them in my house for another minute. Tom protested, saying they couldn't just pack up and go with the kids asleep, but I was adamant. As they hurriedly packed their things and woke the children, I sat in the living room, feeling numb. The grandchildren, groggy and confused, asked what was happening. I couldn't bring myself to explain. I just hugged them and said goodbye, wondering if I would ever see them again. Before they left, Tom tried one last time to explain, to apologize, but I couldn't hear it. The trust was broken, and I couldn't see how it could ever be repaired. I told him not to come back, not to call, not to contact me in any way. Then I watched as they drove away into the night. The house felt emptier than ever after they left. I spent the rest of the night sitting in Elizabeth's favorite chair, wondering how things had gone so wrong. I thought about all the happy memories we had made in this house, Elizabeth and me, and then with Tom as he grew up. It seemed impossible that it had come to this. In the days that followed, I went through a range of emotions. There was anger at Tom for his deception and at myself for being so easily fooled. There was sadness at losing my son and grandchildren all over again. But mostly, there was a deep, aching loneliness. I considered calling Tom, trying to work things out, but every time I picked up the phone, I remembered what I had overheard and put it back down. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. Instead, I focused on moving forward with my life. I called my sister and a few close friends, explaining what had happened. Their support and understanding helped me through the darkest days. I started volunteering at a local community center, which gave me a sense of purpose and connection. I also made the decision to stay in my house. This was the home Elizabeth and I had built together, filled with a lifetime of memories. I wouldn't let Tom's actions taint that. I hired a part-time housekeeper to help with the upkeep, which made managing the place much easier. As the weeks passed, the pain began to lessen. I still had moments of sadness, especially when I thought about my grandchildren, but I also found myself appreciating the peace and independence of my life. I started to rediscover old hobbies and even made some new friends at the community center. Looking back, I realized that while the experience was painful, it taught me valuable lessons about self-respect and the importance of being cautious, even with family. I'm sad that things turned out this way with Tom, but I'm also proud of myself for standing up for what's right. Now, as I sit in our old house, surrounded by memories of Elizabeth, I feel a sense of contentment. Life may not have turned out the way I expected, but I'm determined to make the most of the years I have left, and I'll do it on my own terms, with the knowledge that I stayed true to myself and to Elizabeth's memory.